Heroes, where we believe typology can save the world. I'm Jessie Miller.
And I'm Amanda Fogelson, and today we will be discussing the type ISFP. Just as a reminder, this series serves as a teaser for our 16-episode podcast that will be coming out sometime in 2020, as soon as we can get 100 of each of the 16 personality types. So if you haven't heard of our project or what Typecast Heroes is, please go back and watch our very first video while giving us lots of grace, called Welcome to Typecast Heroes, where you can learn all about the project, why we interview, what we need it for, all the things. And also, just a little reminder that we like to put in front of every video that we post about types and cognitive functions is that anyone can be anything. So there are lots of stereotypes and lots of information on the websites and on the internet, and what we tend to see is that a lot of people will take a test and they just immediately assume that that's their type, and then they spend however many years going down that rabbit hole of that particular type. Or they will hear a video and say, oh, I use that function because I've had that exact example in my life. That's not necessarily what we're talking about here. We're really focused on your default setting and who you are at your core. So not necessarily what the tests say, and not necessarily what you do on an everyday basis or how you make decisions on an everyday basis. You have to look deep inside yourself to really know who you are and which functions you're using. So that being said, we also have a ton of videos about each cognitive function. What is your cognitive stack? What are cognitive functions, etc. You can go binge watch through our channel and learn all about them. And then if you still have questions or would like to chat about the functions, or maybe need help figuring out what type you are, then go ahead and reach out. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, and Discord, and of course, YouTube. So let's go ahead and introduce the ISFPs. So often the behavioral stereotypes with them are that they are super creative. Sometimes they get the reputation that they are a little too emotional. Sometimes people associate them with dancers, creative sorts. However, any type can present as anything. So today we're going to be talking about primarily their cognitive stack. So as we go through what behaviors are typically associated with the cognitive stack, the important thing is not to focus on the behaviors, but the motivation behind the behaviors. So if you have not watched the video, What is Your Cognitive Stack? Please go watch that first, because it's going to give you the framework for which we discuss the ego of an ISFP. And then you can also go watch What Are Cognitive Functions, as we talk about all of them, and there is a large variety of theories that we use to back all of this up. The first function in an ISFP, they have a introverted feeling hero. Now, if you don't know what hero means or introverted feeling, again, go watch those videos, please, 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 and you can learn all of that information. But introverted feeling is primarily concerned with creating a system of values and a framework through which you check your values. So these people have strong opinions that they can't necessarily logic their way through. They just have gut feelings that this is the right thing, this is the thing that makes sense to me. And that is because when they interact with an environment, the first thing they do is they check it against their personal system. Mm-hmm. And so as they're getting older, they're constantly developing and strengthening this internal code, and so by the time they're older, they've got a very strong sense of self usually. Now again, they can have midlife crisis, they can have identity crisis just like the rest of us, but for the most part, they have a strong sense of who they are. That is something that is very closely associated with introverted feeling, if that is your lead function, and if you're an ISFP, it is. So one of the stereotypes I want to kill right now is that they're overly emotional. When you have introverted feeling as your main function, again, introverted feeling is primarily concerned with the things that make emotions. So it doesn't necessarily mean you have a lot of emotions, but you are concerned with the things that make emotions, because emotions can't be explained or logic through, right? So they have to encounter these things so often that they can actually come across as sort of robotic, or kind of detached, or kind of hyper-logical almost, and we'll explain why in just a second. But they don't have to present as whiny, cryy babies, and that usually the memes I see with ISFPs tend to lean that way. And that's just an inaccurate stereotype. Especially as they age, they get more and more used to this coping mechanism of kind of appearing
stoic to the rest of the world, and all of their feelings are inside. So like that's another thing too, is that their feelings and that their value systems are internal. So they're not really interested in forcing them on you. They want to kind of keep them inside themselves. Having introverted feeling in the hero position also means that you can be very empathetic, because when you look at somebody and they're going through pain, you put yourself in their shoes and then you feel the pain that you would feel if you were going through it. So it's not the same as trying to feel their exact pain. It's like you are experiencing your own version of that pain. That can still be incredibly painful or incredibly happy if it's a positive thing.
Either way, though, it's pretty exhausting just because it's not yours and you're still taking it on. So it can still be heavy either way, I guess.
Yes, it can be incredibly challenging, and they can get emotionally overloaded, which is, again, why they tend to front as, or to appear as, somebody who's very unemotional. This also makes them independent as all get out. They do not want other people to tell them how to act or how to do things, because they've got their own code. They understand that other people have their own code, and they're not necessarily super interested in having their code picked apart or looked at under a lens. So I know that certain types are more guilty of this than others, but sacred FI, man, you do not pick apart somebody's introverted feeling. So now we're going to go into their parent function. So the second function is often called the auxiliary or parent or mother, father function. So this is the one that's typically associated with what we call a compulsion. So it is something that is constantly grabbing you up by the ear and reminding you need to do things. You need to do things a different way, and it kind of jerks you back into reality. Some ISFPs are going to have this function stronger than others, depending on where they are in their life and where they are in their journey. So if you don't relate to all of this, it doesn't mean you're not an ISFP. It just means you may be in a different place. So Extroverted Sensing is their second, and you can go watch our video on Extroverted Sensing. Extroverted Sensing is based in reality. It is attached to the moment. It's based in concrete data. It's based in facts that you can prove, not theoreticals, but actual facts. It is concerned with practical applications to the real world. So when somebody is fully embraced with Extroverted Sensing, that means they want you to keep your theories to yourself. If they don't have a practical application, then they don't have room for them. It also means that they can be very particular about their appearance, because as they are so connected with their body as an extroverted sensor that they tend to care about how they present, because they are fully there in the moment. Sometimes that means that they're kinesthetically inclined as well, so they can be very athletic. They don't have to be, though, but they usually can be very graceful and very much in tune with, again, their body. But this can also make them incredibly distractible, because as they look at the world, Extroverted Sensing is taking in all of the data from the environment that you're immediately in. So it's all of the sensory data that you can see. And if something is off, like a picture is off, like my sister is an ISFP, and she will notice if something is
just like an inch to the left.
Yeah, if something is not right in the room, and that can be incredibly distracting. It also makes them sensitive to their environment. So unpleasant sounds or unpleasant smells or anything like that will probably bother an ISFP faster than most other types. Not all types, but most other types. It can also make it very difficult for them to do repetitive behaviors, because they are so attached to the moment when they are leading with their parent function, when their parent function is fully in tune, because Extroverted Sensing is taking in all of the data, and it has a tendency to want new data to pull in. So if you give a extroverted sensor like an ISFP a stack of paperwork to fill out, they're probably going to be very unsatisfied with that. So it is something that they can keep in mind, and again, why we preach that language is so important, because if you are an ISFP or you love one, it's important to know that Extroverted Sensing has this tendency to really, really struggle with repetitive tasks. Now, ISFPs are a perceiving bridge type. They have Extroverted Sensing in their second, and then they have Introverted Intuition in their third function, which means they can use them almost equally. It's just the tendency and the way they use them are a little different. When you have a third function, everybody has a third function, but that is your child. So we call it the Bratty Function. It can be bratty for everyone. It has a tendency to also be kind of innocent at times and sort of playful. It just depends on the moment. They have introverted intuition as their third, which means they can feel incredibly intuitive. Because what an ISFP has a tendency to do is they are introverted, so they will skip. They will go from their introverted feeling down into introverted intuition. And introverted intuition looks for deeper meanings behind things. It likes abstract concepts. It likes to deal with theoreticals. It likes to try to predict the future 10 years out. It can give them random insights or flashes of things that they feel like are super profound. And then sometimes they can feel really magical, because when they experience a insight once in a while, when it does happen, they can feel really like almost as if it's magic, right?
Because it just came out of nowhere. Like it just kind of came to them, is why that is explained as like a magical feeling.
So what tends to happen then is if an ISFP is in a rough sort of place and they go to take a test and they're looping between these two things, which can be fine. You can stay in a loop and be perfectly healthy. But if you are looping between these two things and you take a test, it's going to tell you you're intuitive, and then you test as an INFP or an INFJ. So the way that you tell the difference, when you are stuck in this loop, this introverted feeling loop, that means that you are looping between how do I feel, what makes sense to me, what are my value systems, and you are combining that with that introverted intuitive third function. So you are looking for all of the abstract theories and concepts, and you're like sticking there. But what extroverted sensing does is it kind of pulls you up, and it's like, hey, no, we got to pay attention to reality now. We got to pay attention to the real world. So it's kind of constantly pulling you to be like, but this isn't practical. Why are we thinking about this? And if you have these two perceiving functions sort of fighting for your attention, it can feel very chaotic. It can feel very stressful to be like, what does this all mean? No, I got to focus on reality. I can't think about what this means anyway. And these two things are constantly fighting. So knowing the language so that you understand that you have these forces in your mind, you can kind of come to terms with them a little better. All right. And now the last function for an ISFP is the inferior extroverted thinking. So inferior function means that you feel bad about this function. You feel sort of insecure. You feel very, you can be defensive about this function. And everybody has an inferior. For introverted feelers, that means it's extroverted thinking. So extroverted thinking is when you like to have all of the outside facts make sense and you try to bring logical systems out into the world. Because this is the last function in the ego of an ISFP, they're not always adept at it, especially when they're younger. So one of their defense mechanisms is if you tell them they're illogical, they have pulled 2 or 3 facts from the outside world and they will spit it back at you and tell you that you are illogical. But they aren't doing this to be vindictive or to be closed-minded or to be bad. They're doing this to protect the ego. Everybody has a tendency to protect their ego in some way. So as an ISFP gets older, they develop a little more sophisticated systems for their introverted feeling because, again, the world is super oriented towards facts and logic and thinkers, especially for ISFP men, but women can encounter it too because ISFPs have a tendency also to like science. Or to like things that have a personal cause to them, which can be very technical fields. And so when they're in that environment, they feel the need to justify all of their beliefs with logic, and sometimes that can be really challenging. But as they age, and we will have a whole video on type development, they can get a little better at establishing those systems. It also means that they can consume a lot of data. So I have seen this with ISFPs where they will find something that they are super interested in, and they will spend 3 days going down a rabbit hole, and it kind of looks like extroverted intuition. But the reason that it's not is because it already has its end goal. So again, introverted feeling starts with I believe this, now I've got to prove this. Very rare. And so introverted intuition has also a tendency to just want to know. And so if you look at these functions, then they can end up kind of looking like an extroverted intuitive.
They like combine to look like one function almost. But yeah, there is a massive difference. Extroverted intuition, you're going to go down a rabbit hole because you're distracted every time you look at something new or read something new, and then you want to know about that thing now. And so you just keep on reading. But for what Jesse's talking about, it's like you have this end goal, and yet you can spend hours or days obsessed with that one topic. That's the difference between those two functions together versus extroverted intuition.
And extroverted intuitives do this every day, all the time. ISFPs will do this occasionally, or they will do this when they are feeling a period of time of severe stress, because that introverted intuitive child wants to understand and it wants to make sense of the world. So they will engage with that introverted intuitive child, and they will start kind of down this path where they sort of spiral. So it can be incredibly, like I said, stressful for an ISFP. So understanding that they have a tendency to do that, they can get into their extroverted sensing parent and be like, no, I gotta focus on this moment. And often I find the ISFPs who ground themselves in reality do much better, because it's like they take a step back. They take a step back from that very scary wormhole. So I mentioned my sister is an ISFP. So something else about ISFPs is they tend to like practical data. So we just talked about the introverted intuitive child and the extroverted thinking inferior, but those are mostly when they are not necessarily the healthiest, or when they are encountering a period of extreme stress. But for the most part, a healthy ISFP is going to want things to be applied to the real world. So one of the things I like about ISFPs is they can have a very deep conversation with you about philosophy or about the future of neuroscience or about whatever it may be. And then they will come back up to the real world and they will get done whatever they need to. Something else about their way that they function with their extroverted sensing is they can be very good at lots of things. It doesn't have to just be art. Now, my sister is an award-winning artist. Literally, she's won so many awards for her art because she does these incredibly realistic paintings and drawings. It's unbelievable, because when she looks at a picture, she's using her extroverted sensing to look at all of the details, all of the data of the picture, and then she's using her kinesthetic skills to literally copy what she's seeing. It's outrageous. Like, you should see some of the things that she can do.
It's like a photograph.
It's literally
like
a photograph.
Yeah.
She's insane. And then at the same time, she has been always incredibly gifted at science. She's at Georgia State studying metacognition. So in a research lab. Like, that's what she does all day. So she's talented in both regards. So just because somebody is an artist doesn't mean that they can't be good at science, and vice versa. Like there's not a whole lot that my sister can't do. And she's very capable at just existing. So keep that in mind as well. A lot of people get that feeling, get the feeler label, and they're like, oh no, I can't be a feeler, I'm too logical. But a lot of that is your extroverted thinking child, or extroverted thinking inferior function, making you defensive about the fact that you're not logical enough, or you know inside somewhere that you are not as logical as other people, and you feel kind of guilty about that. But I'm giving you permission right now that you don't have to feel guilty about that, that you can own yourself as you are and accept that you can have a lot of feelings and still be a very logical person. It doesn't make you completely illogical. It just means when you are interacting with the world, you check it against things that you can't always reason your way through. And some things in life, let's just be honest, there's not reason or logic for it, and that doesn't make them any less valid. So, role of society. First off, you should probably not judge them or put them in a box. What I've noticed with the MBTI community is that because there don't tend to be a lot of ISFPs involved in MBTI, a lot of the things that we end up reading about them is kind of caricature-y. Like, it's just like fake stuff. It's not even accurate of what an ISFP would actually look like in the real world, which is a shame because they are a larger percent of the population, which means that they can look very different. You can have an ISFP scientist next to an INFP or ISFP ballerina next to an ISFP athlete. Don't judge them. Don't resign them to a caricature. Like, don't resign them to just behavioral stereotypes that are typically associated with the feelers. Which is really what's happening. It's almost like people just combine the feelers and the feeling aspect and the sensing aspect, and sensors get crap all the time too, which we hate more than anything. And so if you combine those two, it's just like the internet can be cruel. Really can. Not fair. Not cool. Don't do it. And ISFPs are super interested in their self-development, but I think what usually happens is they end up testing as intuitives because the tests are just incorrect. So
a lot of ISFPs
Probably.
we've come to find test as INFJs.
Or INFPs, depending.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes even I've had INTPs who are actually ISFPs. So if you have questions about your type and you're over 18, please contact us because we would love to work with you. ISFPs have been particularly difficult for me to get in contact with for this interview process. But again, I really just think it's because a lot of them are mistyped.
Yeah.
And being mistyped is not the worst thing in the world. However, when you're trying to interact with this language, what I've seen happen is people try to alter the definitions of things to fit their experience, which is not helpful to anyone.
So that they can stay that type. So essentially they'll see an INFJ and they'll change what NI looks like to fit the FINI in an ISFP. Or also, again, the stereotypes, how like we said in the beginning, if you're overly emotional, that doesn't make you an ISFP, that doesn't make you an INFP, that literally could be anyone going through any hard time. Like, it could be any type. So just more than anything, you have to understand the functions and then also look inside yourself and know who you are at your core, your default setting.
Mm-hmm.
But what is seriously so important is to understand the functions. And at the end of the day, they're definitions. So like, don't try to tweak it to fit your type or whatever type you're wanting to be. Just learn what they actually really are.
Role of society. So first off, go easy on the ISFPs if you are in the MBTI community, because the MBTI community is often really cruel to sensors and to feelers. So you get both of those things there. Also, if you're just somebody who's stumbling onto this because you just got the ISFP type, or somebody you love just got the ISFP type, allow them to feel what they need to feel and to process what they need to process. Because when they have a breakdown, which happens sometimes, because again, they're pulling at everybody's pain, everybody's emotion, because they're looking at somebody, they're putting themselves in the shoes of those people, and then they can sometimes tap into that introverted intuitive child. And so then they're trying to look for, well, what does this all mean? And they can get very overwhelmed, they can get very stressed, they can get very anxious, and they can kind of get snappy because that extroverted sensing is constantly trying to pull them up to reality. And you don't always want to go there when you're looping. You don't want to be in reality. You don't want to listen to the
And you don't want to extrovert. Like, you don't want to do the opposite attitude of what you are, right? If you're an introvert and you've got your third function, which is introverted, as is every type, it's the same attitude for the first and third. That's comfortable, and it feels easier to do that. And also that child, like we said before, is kind of bratty sometimes. So it does feel good and easy to loop like that. And it does, that compulsion can kind of suck because it kind of pulls you out of your head. It pulls you out of introverting and into the real world. And sometimes you don't want to do that.
So one of the hardest things I see is ISFPs without a purpose. So ISFPs who are living in that introverted feeling, introverted intuition loop, and then they are kind of stuck with, well, what does this all mean? What is my greater purpose? What should I be doing? And so they will allow themselves the space to dream or to plan out a future far into advance, but then extroverted sensing comes in and says, nope, that's not realistic, let's not even try. And it can be really challenging because one of the strong suits of an ISFP is they tend to be very practical, but sometimes that comes at the expense of their dreams. Mm-hmm. My suggestion is to try and rectify those two things. Your dreams don't have to be unrealistic. You can if anyone can figure out a way to make it work, it's ISFPs.
Oh, absolutely.
So y'all can pick a goal and then figure out how to get there using that introverted intuitive child for good and the extroverted sensing for reality. And then you can use your extroverted thinking inferior function to kind of put it all together, and you can find a path forward that means something to you. You can be whatever you want to be. You can be mathematicians, you can be counselors, you can be dancers, anything you want. The world is yours. You just have to figure out a way to get there.
You have all the tools to do it.
So that is your role in society, is just to follow your dreams, whatever they may look like. Because being human is hard.
And this should make it just a little bit easier.
Thank you for watching our channel. And if you are an ISFP, please come interview if you are over 18. And if you don't know, again, if you don't know what that project is, go watch Welcome to Typecast Hero.
Just a little tidbit about the project so we can rope you in and you guys will come and interview. We really need 100 of each of the 16 personality types for a data set that Jesse's been working on all year, actually.
A long time.
And so if you guys could please help, we could use it. If you guys have friends and family, pass along our information, have them watch some of these videos. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Reddit, and Discord, and obviously YouTube. So just comment below or message us on any of those social media outlets, and we are so happy to talk to you and your friends and your family. If you are an ISFP and you have not yet reached out, please do. Please do. A lot of the types, we kind of have enough people, but ISFPs, we need y'all. So please help. It would mean the world to us. It would also help us release that podcast that we were talking about. That's kind of the whole goal of this first set of interviews, is to be able to release this podcast, hopefully, sometime in the summer, beginning of fall.
Thank you for watching Typecast Hero. We'll see you next time.
See ya!
Let's gather around the type fire and sing our type fire song. Our MBTITYPOLOGY song. And if you feel uncomfortable, then know there's nothing wrong.